Hey everyone, it's Josh from Blockchain DXP. And firstly, thank you so much for joining in today. Really appreciate you talking to me and sharing your knowledge and information about Bitcoin and Relai. Now, I'm really curious to know about your experience. And I'm looking at your LinkedIn post and really like the things that you post. And even Relai's LinkedIn posts are really interesting. Now, you're the person who's in charge of press and content for Relai, and you want to make Bitcoin really easy for people to understand. And you want to build the entire world in Bitcoin. So thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate you doing this, yo.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks once again. Now, before we start, just wanted to check, how has your day been so far? And is there anything interesting planned for the start of this week?
It's been a regular start to Monday, getting locked in meetings and replying to emails and, having a coffee. So it looks like an eventful week.
Yeah.
And yeah, whatever will be happening in Bitcoin, I need to cover that. So we'll watch out for what's going on.
Yeah, and I think on the 29th is when the FOMC meeting is scheduled to take place as well, isn't it? That should definitely be eventful, at least as far as the price of Bitcoin is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of price, in the long run doesn't matter. That's sort of my opinion. But yeah, for sure. I mean, these key events are always interesting. At least they give an explanation as to why the fiat-denominated price in Bitcoin is pumping or dumping or whatever's going on.
That's absolutely great. And now you also have President Trump, who's been sworn in as the President of the United States of America. And whether we like him or not, he definitely has a very strong say in the trajectory and adoption of Bitcoin. And on the 23rd of this month, he has signed quite a lot of executive actions and orders. So what do you see, the price of Bitcoin and even the adoption of Bitcoin changing with President Donald Trump being reelected?
I mean, it's probably the better outcome than if the other side would have gotten elected, just based on, I never try to get political, but if one part of political spectrum is attacking your industry, you kind of have to get active, right? So I think on that premise, if you look at Operation Choke Point 2.0, it is now clear that there have been some malice in the US government who were very against crypto in general. And especially Bitcoin with the whole FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, if no one has heard of that, against the mining industry, neglecting data, neglecting things like almost 60% of the network is run on renewables. Miners look for cheap energy to stay alive. That's their entire business model. And they're also moving into the AI world because at the end of the day, they're a data center. So a lot of that stuff has sort of been thrown out of the window. And you now see this executive order with making the US the AI and crypto power hub. You have the potential of a Bitcoin reserve. I'm going to call it out and say it's going to be a crypto reserve because you have lobby groups like XRP, for example, who are very invested in adding their utility token, it's not other way to say it in my opinion, to and the only utility that is for Ripple Labs to make money, to their stockpile. So I think it will be interesting to see whether it will be a Bitcoin reserve, maybe even a crypto reserve. And what I've read recently, or what someone like Brian Armstrong has actually said, is we could even go a step further and establish a sovereign wealth fund that is solely allocating to Bitcoin. So all of these concepts are out there now. A lot of Bitcoin maxis, which I wouldn't put myself in that category. I mean, I do hold Bitcoin exclusively, and I work for a Bitcoin self-custody company. But I'm well aware, as someone more with the libertarian mindset, that everyone could do with their own money as they please. They're very upset now that the announcement is not coming, that like the reserve is not here. And I kind of go like, he's in office for like, what, a week now? Let's maybe give the guy some time and really see if that sparks interest. On the adoption side of things, I think it will definitely help if the economic superpower in the world, that is the US, is actually friendly towards Bitcoin, crypto in general, and is not pushing down on it. As an industry, we just need to make sure that, let's say, not the bad players get involved. Think of people like an SBF or something like that. If you have these guys in there, that wouldn't be a good thing. But I'm certain that there will be announcements which we will like. There will be announcements which we dislike. But as a whole, I think it's a step in the right direction.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And so far as my understanding is, President Donald Trump has already fulfilled a lot of his promises. And one of the promises that he did actually make is regarding ban on central bank digital currencies.
Mhm.
So in one of the executive actions, he did actually state that there will be an outright ban on central bank digital currencies. And what you said from a political point of view, had the other party been in, things would have been completely different. We would be hearing more news regarding CBDCs. And I did like what you said about Ripple as well. 100% agree to this. Now, Joel, for our listeners in Dubai and UAE, can you share a bit about your background and your journey in the Bitcoin space? As in, when did you get introduced to Bitcoin and what has your journey been thus far?
Sure. So first of all, love the UAE. I've been there in December for a forced holiday. Let's say it this way. My boss was like, "You have to take some days off. You work too much, and I don't want to give you too many holidays into the next year." So I went to Abu Dhabi, and I really like the whole attitude towards business life in general. Living in the West, there's a lot of like misconceptions about this country or this region as a whole. So glad that I can approach that there. Yeah, my Bitcoin journey is actually pretty much like most Bitcoin journeys. I stumbled upon it in 2011 just because I needed to buy a plane ticket. And I did not want my parents to find out where I was going because I was going to a protest in London,
Right.
the Occupy Wall Street protests. And a friend of mine was like, just bring me cash and I can show you this digital currency called Bitcoin. So went there, exchanged, bought the plane tickets from him. And then there was a third friend who would fly with me because I was underage and I needed a companion. And then, for the next 2 years, forgot about Bitcoin. In 2013, I had a friend in South Africa who was locked out of his bank account because of local protests. And by some chance, I tried to send him money and, didn't want to use Western Union or PayPal because it was also uncertain whether he would have access to these accounts and this money. So I asked him, like, do you know of this thing called Bitcoin? And ironically, he did because he also stumbled across it. So I sent him money. And from that moment on, it was kind of fascinating to me to use something being programmed into the internet, if you want to say so, and that's being native. And then for the next 4 years, I really used Bitcoin just as a replacement for a credit card or something. Back then, the infrastructure in fintech wasn't good enough. I just turned 18, 19 at this point, or I was 17 at this point. I was 17, so I was on the brink of turning 18, having your own bank account these days, not being dependent on your parents, and I was freelancing already. So it just makes sense to have this magic internet money. And then in 2017, I really went down the rabbit hole because you had literature coming out. You did not have to ask the devs on like the Bitcoin Talk forum how things work.
Yeah.
And I went down, the Austrian School of Economics, found out I'm neither a liberal nor a conservative. I used to think of myself as a progressive for most of the time, but then I realized like, oh, this is actually a libertarian mindset, and then just ever stuck in Bitcoin. Obviously also, started using it as a savings tool and not spending it anymore. That was, looking back, the big mistake, but that's what you make in the early days. Yeah. And in 2023, after freelancing for more than a decade, I was like, I'm done with like being in the media world. I used to be a journalist. I then transitioned into being more of a press spokesperson / content manager for startups. And I already helped a lot of Bitcoin startups, but I knew I wanted to work in the industry full time. And then had a chat with my now boss, Imo, at Relai. And that's how I basically got into working for Europe's largest Bitcoin platform.
That's absolutely brilliant. And you mentioned about, Austrian economics. Just yesterday, my niece, she was learning about Keynesian economics. Mm-hmm. And I asked her that in your curriculum, do they talk about Austrian economics? And she said no. And she gave me a reason as to why the Keynesian economics would not want to have Austrian economics as part of the curriculum. And, she truly understands what Bitcoin is. So from an Austrian point of view, or from an Austrian economics point of view, she truly understands what Bitcoin is. And you talked about being in Abu Dhabi. I'm not sure if you know, but Dubai has the oldest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Mm-hmm. There's an exchange called Shop, which got the license 1 week before Kraken, actually, going back to 2011. Not quite a lot of people know that. But you attended the Bitcoin MENA event, right? What was that experience like? Because I remember you posted a video. It was a summary of what the event was in Abu Dhabi, and I immediately shared it with a couple of my colleagues. What was the Bitcoin MENA event like in Abu Dhabi?
It was very much so. It's organized by Bitcoin Magazine, and at least in the Bitcoin circles, they have a little bit of the, uh, how should I say, the branding of being, the overhyped event and stuff. But in my experience, it was quite great. I got to meet a lot of, people working in the UAE government responsible for the blockchain department, or
Mhm.
I met a lot of the representatives of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and really got to speak to those people and seeing the interesting aspect as someone who grew up in a very Western, I would say, Roman Catholic environment.
Mhm.
Hearing a lot of the thought principles behind is Bitcoin, halal, haram, all of these things.
Yeah.
That was very interesting from an education standpoint. And then just the friendliness towards the industry
Yeah.
was really what was for me eye opening, because I always knew like Dubai is a crypto hub. I then also understood the how could you say, the power plays between Abu Dhabi and
Yeah.
Dubai being a little bit more like Vegas, I would say, where
Kind of.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff going on, and Abu Dhabi is more like maybe Washington DC if you compare that to the US. So there's a lot
Great
of
example. Yeah.
administrative stuff and things. So that was quite cool. And then just generally speaking, also the institutional interest. So you could clearly see and feel it.
Mhm.
There were a lot of great speakers there. And yeah, really, really surprised by how far along they are compared to what we are in Europe. Like, we usually pat ourselves on the back and go like, oh, we're the first ones to introduce like
Yeah.
MiCA regulation and things.
Yeah.
And that is not really needed in the UAE. There is a little bit, but everyone sort of understood on a handshake basis that you do business. And that's what I really liked.
Yeah.
And yeah, just generally also how far advanced the knowledge is. And I'm really curious to see, who knows, maybe the Sovereign Wealth Fund is already accumulating, maybe not.
Yep.
I think the interest is definitely there.
There are rumors about, some wealth funds accumulating Bitcoin. And while the Bitcoin MENA event was taking place, there was also a fintech session in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
And Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, he
yeah.
actually made a statement. He said that Abu Dhabi might be the crypto capital of the world and even artificial intelligence. So it's
Yeah.
going to be really interesting to see, what the future is. Now, you
I
also,
actually interviewed Larry Fink once when I was a journalist
excellent.
back then, and that was really in the time when he was anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto. So to see
Oh,
that
excellent.
and how it's evolved,
Change here.
and also, yeah, we were like casually like 500 meters away from these guys speaking about it, and sort of the other part of the industry over there. So that was also great by the organizers of the Abu Dhabi
Yep.
conference.
At Next
Right?
Center.
I don't know yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That they really are open to having both sides of the party host
Yep.
there.
Now, you also manage a YouTube channel, isn't it?
Mhm.
And what I really like is that the naming of it, you say Relai, Learn Bitcoin. So any interesting videos coming up in this particular week, or what is the best video that you like to recommend to our listeners?
So interesting videos. We have a few interesting podcast guests coming up. I have to double down a bit because we're in the midst of getting the MiCA license over here in Europe.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like regulatory change and things I need to introduce. But in terms of having interesting videos, I did interview the representatives of the Bitcoin Initiative Switzerland, where they want a constitutional change to actually hold Bitcoin as a reserve, just like gold. So that was quite a fascinating interview. It's available in English and German. I always do both languages, but I guess for your audience, English is going to be better.
Yeah.
And then just generally, I also had some good videos, like making the point for why Switzerland should hold Bitcoin, the comparisons between gold and Bitcoin. There's a playlist called Bitcoin Simply Explained, and I think those are really the
Excellent.
videos I put most time and effort in.
Yeah.
So that's more or less that. And then in the future, I also want to do documentaries, sort of 20 to 30-minute long ones. It's just a lot of hassle, a lot of organizing, but that's sort of the stuff you can expect the next couple of months that's going to come out on the YouTube channel.
That's excellent. In the show notes, I'll definitely go ahead and mention that. Now, before we talk about Relai, I do have a very specific question, and this is what I want to ask most of my interviewees. How would you define Bitcoin? And you touch base upon, you're only into Bitcoin. So I'm really curious to understand. And based on your experience understanding Bitcoin going back to more than a decade, how would you define individually Bitcoin? What is your definition of Bitcoin?
My definition of Bitcoin is it's a tool to give you or to enable you to do whatever you want with it. Whether you want to save, whether you're in it for the gains. I mean, it is the best performing asset in the last decade, so that works. And it really enables you to take or to reclaim your self-sovereignty, because you need to learn how to have the 12 words. And frankly, I mean, this goes for the entire crypto sector. If you also want to hold crypto properly, you have to have the self-custody of your wallet. And it just teaches you a lot of these responsibilities I think we've lost over time. And once you do that, and once you go down that rabbit hole, once you realize what you need to do, you actually are enabling yourself to become much, much freer in whatever sense you want to be, financially speaking, geographically speaking, or just having a savings tool that enables you to actually also, have a better future.
That's a short and sweet, brilliant definition, and I'm really liking that. Now, let's talk about Relai. Can you tell your audience about Relai, its history, the team behind it, and why is it only focusing on Bitcoin, which I personally like, by the way?
So the idea behind Relai came out of our co-founders, Adam and Julian. Adam is our CTO, Julian is our CEO. And the idea was back in 2020, they really wanted to have a simple Bitcoin savings app that they could show to their friends and family. That is not, I mean, for us, having an account on Kraken is super easy. We do this every day, for example. But for a normie, it doesn't make sense to have this huge selection. They maybe want to start with the biggest one, which is Bitcoin. So they really sat down together at a hackathon, built the first version of the app, raised some money, and realized there is demand for that on the market. We do know that we're a little bit higher priced in terms of, the fee structure and stuff. If you apply everything, you get down to 0.9%. I think Kraken, and they are at like 0.3 or something, maybe 0.4. However, we really have the keen focus on Bitcoin only. We want to make it a smooth experience, and different than what you have with an exchange. You are actually the sole owner of your Bitcoin because we're a self-custody app. So you have your 12 words. You can, if you don't want to use Relai, also import that to any other wallet that supports the BIP39 import. And it should be an easy and accessible point where you can do smash buys. We allow a 0% buy off up to 100 Swiss francs or euros a month. And if you also want to set up a savings plan, so you profit from the DCA regularly, you can do that. Currently, I have to say this on a regulatory basis, we are allowed for Swiss and Italian residents. Yeah. However, that's subject to change once we get the EU license, the MiCA license. So then the app will be available in all EU countries. And therefore, our next step would be to then also orange pill, or how we like to call it, blue pill, because we kind of have blue as a logo, and not to be compared to taking the blue pill from Matrix. It's really orange pilling through the blue pill from Relai. That everyone can hold Bitcoin in their own manner and in a fast and simple way, especially.
And Relay's tagline is also the world's easiest Bitcoin savings app. Short and sweet, simple. I was going through the website, very friendly user experience. Now, let's talk about your team, because you guys have a solid team. Some of them have experience at Bitband, and some are Bitcoin authors as well, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So one of my coworkers, Raphael, he's written a Bitcoin book. My boss, Imo, was the first marketing hire at Bitpanda, helped them become a unicorn. So we got the right brain powers on team. Generally speaking, our marketing team is quite small. We're only 7 people. We're roughly around 50 people in the entire company now. But we have great guys working in product. Now with the whole MiCA stuff, we also have a bigger compliance department, because you have to do these kind of things. Yeah. And then we also have a great management across the board. Everyone's a Bitcoiner. They really want to fulfill this vision of hyperbitcoinization, and having an app and a service where people can actually go to. They have a partner to talk to, and we also have other offerings like an OTC desk, where people can buy larger volumes, have a little bit of a better price. And we're also looking into expanding in the future, maybe into something like inheritance, maybe multi-sig, these kind of things, to really be the one place where if people have something with their Bitcoin or they have a Bitcoin need, they can come to us, they can approach us, and we can hopefully help them out.
I think on ramp Bitcoin they do that, or
Mhm.
that's on ramp they do the inheritance things as well. So that's great. Now, just few days ago, while LinkedIn, I saw a post that the company was in the top 50 companies in the crypto valley by CV Labs. So can you share a bit information to our listeners about that? I think it was
Sure.
last Monday or Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Sure. So we got, being a Swiss company, we
Yeah.
got great relationships also to the Swiss crypto industry, the Bitcoin industry. And CV Labs has actually been there since the beginning, if I can remember. And, being honored with being part of that elite group is obviously great. I think we stand out a bit more because we do Bitcoin only. A lot of
Yeah.
competitors do multi-coin stuff and things. And yeah, just holding the torch up high for the Bitcoin only companies in Switzerland. That we've recently also closed a 12 million Series A round at a 72 million evaluation. So we're going on the right track of things. We're progressing. We're breaking new monthly and quarterly records. Feels like on a daily basis. And yeah, it's just a fun time to be alive. My job becomes a little bit more stressful at times,
Yeah.
because you get a lot of press inquiries. But if that's part of getting Bitcoin people to Bitcoin, I'm all for it.
Yep. Yep. And are there any leadership qualities that stand out by the Relay team in comparison to, let's say, to your competitors?
Um, I mean, I couldn't really tell you in comparison to my competitors because I think Bitcoin is such a vast and big cake, so everyone can have part of that cake. We really don't look at the other Bitcoin only companies as
Hmm.
competitors. We embrace that there's a selection. Again, a lot of our management is very libertarian oriented as well, so we
Yeah.
don't want to force anything onto the market. But generally speaking, our management is very lean. We do have a structure, but the number one thing is like these are your things to get done, and we don't care how you get them done in what time manner. You can literally work for 2 hours and get everything done, or you can work for 12 hours. As long as you get it done, we're happy with it. And we generally have quite a young company. I think our average age is like 32, 33 maybe.
Oh, excellent.
Um, so there's a lot of banter going around, a lot of memes of being shared. We
Yeah.
meet at least twice a year in person. So we have team
Hmm.
summits, and it's always a fun time. We also go to a lot of events together. I live in Vienna in Austria, so a lot of my team is actually also here. My boss is here. One of the other content guys is here. Our CFO is here. So we also occasionally just meet for like a team dinner, obviously being paid on the company card. Not we enjoy a good steak, and we do race for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
joking aside, so it's a lot of dynamic stuff going on, and it's just fun to be in a team where the startup vibes are still quite high, although we're very gradually moving into becoming a scale up, but then
Yeah.
potentially an institution. But they really focus on keeping that alive. So having the banter, having a laugh, maybe sometimes not being politically too correct, also in team meetings and things, but
Yeah.
that's really what you want to see. We're not like this stiff upper lip company that tries to be super professional.
Yeah.
We really keep that freedom spirit alive.
I'll tell you what, the memes that you guys put out is absolutely epic. And Arsen, who's the social media lead, he puts out some really epic memes. What I do is I take that, I download that meme, I edit
Yeah.
it, and I use it for different purposes. So, is there a message you have, especially for the people from the UAE, to use memes to put across a message in a positive way? Because memes are extremely powerful and it sends the
Yeah.
right message, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we literally, I don't know if it's 100% true, we literally memed a president into office through Bitcoin. And I think there's a lot of that stuff we can say. And it's just generally, it's the language of the internet. Even in my friend circles who are not all Bitcoiners, who sometimes are not interested in it, and I'm not trying to force it down their throats, even they send me memes, So it's really the tool to have. And Arsen is our meme sensei. He always, also if you ask him something in Slack or something, I get a meme as a reply. So it's really cool to have these kind of coworkers and just,
Yeah.
again, enjoy that banter.
And it puts across a message in such a straightforward way, so that everyone understands what you're trying to say. Now, in 2024, Relay reached a milestone of 400,000 apps downloaded, and it also won the best crypto startup in 2024.
Mhm.
According to you, Joel, what do you think led to its achievement? Was there any competitive edge that you guys had?
I mean, I think we were we have a first movers advantage because we were literally one of, if not the first Bitcoin
Mhm.
app to go out like this. There is another company in Austria here called Coinfinity. They are longer established than we are. I think they're over 11 years old at this point. However, we were really the first ones to move into, let's call it the digital realm with smartphones, with apps and these kind of things. I would credit a lot of our success also down to us in the marketing team. We often get the compliment, you guys are just a content machine. You put out so much content. So we really are keen on using the platform we have to the best of our abilities and to really create content that educates and that doesn't, how should we say, convict people of something. I think that's the number one mistake I see with a lot of crypto brands is like, this will be the future. You have to do this now. And we're kind of more on the aspect of like, these are the facts. Like, this is what's going on. This is what's happening on this end. And it's up to you to, take control of your future. Also one of our taglines. And that has really led to just more interest and then more download numbers. And just generally speaking, having a good marketing plan in place where we enjoy what we do. We also bring this out. So if I do the videos, this is not an act. Like I like really sitting in front of the camera and educating people about these things. And, also sometimes speaking to both sides. We regularly have meetings with institutional interest. And it's often down to a lack of understanding from their end that they haven't fully grasped Bitcoin or crypto. Yeah. And once you do this and once you get that ball rolling and you just never stop, that's how you get to these download numbers. And again, a little bit help with being first movers.
That's absolutely great. And in 2025, are there any specific milestones the company is planning to achieve?
Specific milestones. I mean, number one thing for us is to get the EU license. Because we really want to orange pill Europe. We've done a good job in Switzerland. We've also done a good job in other countries because having that presence on the internet, people are attracted to you. Italy will be an interesting market for us as well. Now that we also have the licensing there, we can actually also be very proactive. And then just generally, going for Europe where we make it accessible. Being then a regulated entity obviously helps in terms of trust for normal investors. I think Bitcoiners are a little bit more skeptic if we say we're a regulated company, based on what happened in the past. But generally speaking, having that stamp of approval, saying like, hey, we got all of the licensing done, we got all of the ISO checks done, the audits done, we have implemented everything that we need to do. It's up to debate if that's fair or not, but that's a different topic. And just being that number one address for people to buy Bitcoin. Again, there are other companies. I think we're doing an excellent job. And generally speaking, improving the product that good in 2025 that it can actually also then scale to the entirety of Europe. And who knows, maybe beyond. That's sort of our key focus point for this year and for the next couple of years.
What are the plans of probably venturing into the Middle East area, maybe Dubai, UAE, or Saudi Arabia? Any plans for that?
We, funnily enough, one of the crypto exchanges over here in Austria, Bitpanda, is now stepping into that world.
Yep.
And we said it's definitely a goal to have, but we go from like Switzerland to Europe first, and then we're slowly expanding. But, seeing how the growth is down there, and especially how friendly everything is towards Bitcoin and crypto, I think it would make sense that maybe in like the next 5 years, we could potentially also see an entity in the MENA region. I said internally, if we need someone to go out down there, test it, I'm doing it on my own time voluntarily, because it's not a bad place to work at. So yeah, who knows? Maybe the next 5 years will also be present.
That's absolutely great, because right now when you talk about Dubai, there are too many companies, so it's kind of like a red ocean at the moment. I'm really curious to check, what the state of Bitcoin or even cryptocurrency or shitcoin, so to speak, is in Saudi Arabia. What is their stance regarding it? Because at this particular moment, I'm not hearing quite a lot of news from Saudi Arabia, because they have Vision 2030 coming up as well, isn't it, over there? So I'm really curious to find out what their stance on a legality point is regarding Bitcoin. I'm hoping, because as you mentioned, at the Bitcoin MENA event, I think it was Harris Irfan who was talking about Bitcoin being the most Sharia form of money, isn't it? Sharia compliant form of money.
Yeah. I mean, The whole, again, in the Bitcoin maxi community, there's a lot of like, I would almost say hate going on now, like, oh, the meme coins are coming and stuff. And again, as a libertarian, I go like, I cannot force people to use whatever they want to use.
Yeah.
And especially in the economic times we live right now, if you've not been fortunate enough to have a lot of wealth stored somewhere, whether that be in gold, real estate, having a lot of fiat bills at home, you're trying to look for outlets. And if that's what it takes, I've read a study that Gen Z has really gotten into investing through stuff like the pump and dumps, the meme coins and things.
Mm-hmm.
If that gets them into a place where they go, all right, if I want to save, for example, I use Bitcoin. If I want to spend, I use stablecoin. And if I want to gamble a little bit of my income, I gamble on that. And I'm trying to make as much money to maybe have more stablecoins or more Bitcoin. I think that's an okay place to be, and you have to start somewhere. I'm fully with you that there's a lot of casino stuff going on currently. And I hope I don't offend anyone when I say, that Dubai was Vegas and things, but you kind of have that sense. A lot of like the crypto influencers also moving to Dubai and things. Yeah. But I think that's just part of the adoption. I mean, if you look at tech companies, for example, the .com bubble happened. So many companies were spun up before that, which have absolutely no use case. And people in the industry knew this, but it happened anyway. And look where technology is these days. So I see the same thing happening with Bitcoin and crypto. And, if that drives interest in the UAE, in Dubai, and if that really positions itself then to maybe have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, whatever it is, looking at this and going like, hey, if they could do it, we could do it as well. I think that's a net positive. And we're just in the meme coin phase of things. It used to be the NFT phase. It used to be, hosted mining, and now ICOs, and now it's that. So I think that's just part of the industry a little bit as well.
There was massive hype regarding metaverse, and that is completely died down.
Exactly. And generally speaking, also like I always make the joke because I have a lot of friends working in venture capital. You guys used to be the big tech bros, and then you moved into the Web3 bros, and now you're the AI bros, and now like Web3 came back for a very short time, so they're back in Web3, and now it's always this trend chasing thing. But who knows? Maybe one of the time one of these trends will stick. I doubt it, but it's good to see. It's good to see like healthy competition in that sense. And again, if people learn the essence of what to invest in and they land at the right thing, in my opinion, being Bitcoin, that's the right thing to go. So who are we to judge how they get there?
Absolutely spot on. And I saw this news about Relai being a member of Bitcoin Association in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. Can you tell our listeners a bit more information about the Bitcoin Association standard in Switzerland?
Yeah, so Switzerland has always had very lean and actually good regulation towards Bitcoin and digital assets. They went a little bit down the pipe the last few years, but generally speaking, still okay. And the Bitcoin Association Switzerland was really founded to have a voice for institutional interest, but also political interest. Because even though none of us kind of like the involvement of politics, you never know where you're at. It's like making a deal with the table, to quote Donald Trump a few years ago. But nevertheless, you need that relationship. You need to also make sure that we have good legislation, good relationships there, that not another Operation Choke Point can happen. And that association really came out about this, having Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin voices being there if interest is here. And we thought it would be a great opportunity as the biggest Bitcoin-only company in Switzerland to also be present. And, to maybe sometimes go to Zurich or Bern and speak to representatives and really educate them. We've seen a lot of success. I've mentioned the Bitcoin Initiative interview before. That's being pushed out of this movement. So they're really formed and said like, okay, we're part of this association, but we also need something to do with the national bank. You have politicians who are Bitcoiners who are really doing a lot of groundwork on the regional basis. And it's moving letter by letter up into the national discussion as well. And it's really breaking barriers. They're left-leaning politicians, right-leaning politicians. They come together on one end. And I think that's also superpower of having Bitcoin. It really doesn't care where or what end of the world you're coming from. The only thing it cares is like, are you acting according to the network rules? And if you do so, we're happy to let you do whatever you want to do. And that's sort of the philosophy behind the association.
And regarding, left-leaning politician in US, I can only think of Raul Khanna, who's one of the congressmen.
Yep.
I think he's the only Democrat who's talking about trying to get Bitcoin involved among the Democratic Party. Along with that, even Eric Adams, who was a former governor of New York. He used to be a Democrat, but I think he's changing now to be a Republican as well. He might
Yeah,
change
I
it to a
mean, I mean,
Republican.
for every listeners, watch the interview with Eric Adams and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Think of Tucker what you want, but like it's a good interview. Where he really explained like the play he had to do was be a
Yes.
good Democrat, Eric. And I think there's a lot of that going on in that old established world. However, I've read also in the campaigning a lot of actually younger Democrats are stepping in and going like, we have to go back to the basics. We're not the
Yeah.
party of the big banks. We're the party of the people, theoretically speaking. And what better way to enable that than Bitcoin and generally, crypto assets as well? I mean, would I be more comfortable holding a stable coin rather than having fiat cash? Most likely. So a lot of that stuff has been going on. And I think it's just that classical fight of having the old establishment in the Democratic Party against the new one.
Yeah.
And they realized like, hey, we really missed the boat with the crypto crowd. And having people like Elizabeth Warren who don't have a crypto army behind her, it's
Yeah.
probably a few people in her office, seeing that fail and seeing how she really, I would say, hindered the evolution of crypto adoption in the US with her ideas. I think that is going out of the window, and more of these Democrats find the courage to speak out. I would even make the case a lot of them probably also hold Bitcoin and other assets, but they're just not
Yep.
publicly announcing it yet.
I think Jameson Lopp from CASA, he's trying to have a list where he's tracking all the Bitcoin holds held by politicians. I'm not sure if you had a look at that.
Mhm.
Yes, he's one of the guys doing that. Now, regarding the Bitcoin Association Switzerland, I believe there was a meetup last weekend on the 25th. Did any of the team from Relay attend that session by any chance? Or I think it was on the 25th. I could be wrong though.
I think someone went there, yes, because it was over the weekend. So there should be enough time to go there. Generally speaking, regards to meetup, like a lot of us, like I go to the local meetup over here. We also have people working in other countries, so a lot of them do that. And yeah, we may or may not be also planning something for, the Swiss media, having Bitcoin Association Switzerland there, voices there. So we really want to use that opportunity and educate whoever is interested in Bitcoin about the matter. Speaking as someone who speaks to the press a lot of times, I can tell you the interest is clearly there. Currently, it's price driven, but the more I can speak to these people, the more I can actually also show them that there's much more to this than just looking at the US price or Swiss franc price or whatever. There is really a movement and there's really an idea behind it. So yeah, it's interesting to see whether these events are fruitful, but I think they are, and they're always fun to be there because you get to meet a lot of great people.
But the thing, with this associations, historically, Bitcoin has had allergic reaction to, let's say, association or foundation. Now, when you talk about Bitcoin, we talk about distributed or decentralization ethos. One question which I wanted to ask is, by joining, let's say, the Bitcoin Association in Switzerland, do you think it kind of contradicts to the very principle of what Bitcoin stands for? As in, not be associated to any association or foundation.
I mean, I think this is a main argument in the Bitcoin space where this is one of my biggest criticism points. We really have to start thinking commercially. Bitcoin Association Switzerland is not the CMO of Bitcoin itself. It's just another entity that's actually helping with the adoption. And we also get this criticism a lot for our own end of the company. Like, why do you have tracking enabled in your app? Why do you measure how much time I spend on the website? Well, I use that to actually build and create better content or build a better app and really understand what people want. So I think a lot of that sense, yes, from a philosophical standpoint, it's definitely different than what the idea is. But having said that, we do need these associations. We do need a contact point for people. And it doesn't matter who you meet in the association. Everyone will tell you like, hey, do your own research. Nothing I say is written in law. But these are sort of the right resources or the right things to get started. So it's really something that opens up the dialogue around Bitcoin. And I think if everyone would sort of be hiding away in their cellar or in their mom's basement, we wouldn't see this adoption probably. So we need the first couple of voices to go out there and also taking a little bit of fire, from the community.
Fair point. I kind of agree to what you're saying. Does make a valid explanation as well. Now, on your website, it does say that Relai is work helping individuals and businesses as well. So let's break it down. How can individuals benefit from Relay?
It's very simple. If you want to buy Bitcoin as a Swiss or Italian resident, again, I have to claim this because of regulation
Yeah.
for now. You can actually download the app in the App Store, Google and Apple. You can create an account. You need to do the verification now. We used to have a limit for verifications, and now we have to apply it from the get-go. But once you do that, it's a smooth process. And you can then start buying Bitcoin. You can also sell Bitcoin if you want to. And you can also set up something like an auto invest plan where you can buy Bitcoin on a recurring time frame. And yeah, we have a lot of great resources, a lot of education material right in the app. We have our 21 Bitcoin basics email course. We have my videos. We have the newsletter. We have a freebie if you want to send something to a friend so they can read in 10 minutes and get sort of the basis of Bitcoin. There's a lot of that. So you don't really need to download the Relay app to, buy Bitcoin only and only use it this way. It can also be really an education center where if you want to find out more about Bitcoin, you can. And then obviously having the website and our socials and these kind of things.
And for businesses, it's the same thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the businesses are a little bit different treated because obviously, you need to do all of these compliance checks, like, because Bitcoin is a big business solvent, is it like a fraudulent one and these kind of things. But it's generally speaking the same thing. It's just a little bit higher volumes because businesses tend to, exchange cash on their balance sheet for Bitcoin, maybe sell other assets like gold or real estate and put Bitcoin on there. But essentially, it's the same attitude. The only thing they have is they have dedicated account managers that help them get through the process. So it's a little bit more hands-on. But we also had a lot of users who started using the app, started buying their first couple of Bitcoin, and then said, hey, I also have the business. Why not do it with you as well? So we really want to be the Bitcoin platform where if people have questions, want to learn more, buy Bitcoin, or have a contact person, they could really come to us and we can be there to help for Swiss and Italian residents for now, and then hopefully the entire of EU later.
That'd be absolutely wicked. And it also says about Bitcoin private work. Is that something similar to OTC, or is that something different?
It's more or less the same thing,
Okay.
yes. So if someone wants to buy vast amounts and, we do also have like yearly trading limits in the app, again, just based on regulations. If you exceed those, you get contacted anyway, and you just have the options to do a little bit of a better deal there and have an OTC or, again, a contact point, depending how high your volume and your intended buy is.
Now, Relay focuses only on Bitcoin and not other cryptocurrencies, which I personally like, and I think it is great. But what was the reasoning only to focus on Bitcoin, and are there possibilities, let's say, in the near future, you may be offering, let's say, another cryptocurrencies, let's say, like Ethereum or maybe Solana, or just sticking to the guns of Bitcoin?
No, we're sticking exclusively to Bitcoin, and the idea is really, if someone has a lot of coins, if they want a proper Bitcoin service, they can use us. So that's sort of locked in and safe there.
Yeah.
They don't have to, move around between different wallets and things. And we kind of approached it like being a gold broker, if you want to say so. We exclusively sell our own, the asset being Bitcoin, and really optimizing everything for that. We also we're still in beta with it. We're also dabbling around with the Lightning Network. So we also want to offer additional stuff. Like if you do want to spend your Bitcoin in an everyday situation and you have the opportunity, here's the way to go. So there's a lot of that stuff happening, and just our focus is it's going to be Bitcoin only. Maybe in the future, if something like stablecoins on Bitcoin are a thing, we could see that. But for now, we really said we don't want the hassle with, the different networks and the different tech stacks. We really focus on that only. And we've been successful so far. And if someone wants to have all of these other things, we have resources where we tell them, if you want to buy, I don't know, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, whatever, there's Kraken, there's Bitpanda in Europe. So you have these options, and we just stick to, the digital gold.
I really am liking this answer, to be honest, because I often say that once you understand what Bitcoin is, you'll truly understand what it is not. Now, earlier on, we talked about the narratives in the space. We talked about metaverse, decentralized finance. One of the narratives slowly building up is regarding BTC DeFi or Bitcoin decentralized finance,
Mm-hmm.
something similar to maybe, stable coins being issued on Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
network.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know what happened to Celsius and Block 5.
Mm-hmm.
Are these something that in the near future Relay might be focusing on, or is there an option for that to do that? Is it too early to tell right now?
I think it's a little bit too early to tell. We definitely have the interest by our user base. It's just we say if there's any way, shape, or form of doing this, it has to be in a self-custodial manner, which makes it really hard because it makes it really
Mhm.
technical. And generally, that's my opinion now. The whole borrow lending thing, this has always been the case in finance. You need a trusted party. You need someone that is actually negotiating the deals, making
Yeah.
sure that from a legal standpoint, everything stands. So whether that could be fully solved in the Bitcoin ethos of not handing away your keys and stuff, I know there's possibilities with like escrows and escrow addresses and time locks and these kind of things. But I think that will be always there, kind of. In regards to the other innovations taking place, I think what's interesting is stuff like stablecoins on Bitcoin, maybe even having side chains or drive chains that enable this and really taking the pressure off the main chain, because we all know if there's a lot
Yeah.
of traffic on Bitcoin's blockchain, it gets expensive.
Yeah.
So I think we will see a future where Bitcoin is sort of the main chain layer, is sort of like the vault where a lot of stuff is happening, and you will then just build upon that. Just like everything in Bitcoin, it moves a bit slower, but that's okay. We want to stick to the foundation first and then build solutions. But
Yeah.
if there is a way, shape, or form, I think this will definitely happen. Borrowing, lending on Bitcoin, it's already kind of happening. And then you also see the interest by institutional stuff like ETFs. That's also a scaling solution in its own way. So there will be sort of different ways, I think, to approach the ecosystem. And then also having the whole DeFi conversation with peer-to-peer lending or exchanges or these kind of things. That's also an inevitability, in my opinion. So it's interesting if you're a builder in Bitcoin and you have the skill set. I think you should commit your time to finding solutions to these kind of questions.
Yep, yep. And you touch base about, things are relatively slow when it comes to building
Mhm.
things on Bitcoin. I think that is a strength, isn't it? Compared
Yes.
to, let's say, centralized systems. Like, we know what Mark Zuckerberg did. He made the changes in just a matter of 24 hours regarding fact checking. In Bitcoin, it takes a lot of time, but that's the strength of Bitcoin, I definitely do think. Now, talking
Yeah,
about
most definitely.
security. Yeah. Talking about security, security is absolutely critical for Bitcoin users and even in the cryptocurrency space. How does Relay ensure that users' funds remain absolutely secure? There are no hacks or attacks as such.
So that's the great advantage of us being self-custodial. We
Yeah.
don't actually hold customer funds. The only funds we hold for a very short period of time is obviously if you send us euros or Swiss francs, we then convert it. But you always have to give a Bitcoin address where to send those funds to. So all we do is convert dirty fiat into good money and send it your way. What we do a lot is we do a lot of the security aspect educationally. So being self-custodial, you are in control of your money, right? So if you
Yeah.
lose these words, there's nothing really we can do because we don't have any access to these funds or even those seed phrases. What we are trying to find is a better backupping solutions. So think of your exports, think of your if you go down a bit the rabbit hole of like multi-sigs, having these Bitcoin files and stuff. So there is a way we're working on that currently, and we're constantly trying to improve. And then just again, what we do in marketing, educating people about if you get these
Yeah.
12 words, don't just write them down on a piece of paper, buy a seed plate, buy steel plates, buy seed rings, whatever, stamp it in there and have it safely stored away. So if something happens, you are still in control of these funds because it's not Relay that controls them. It's on the blockchain that you gain access to your coins through that seed phrase. So there's a lot of that stuff we're doing. And then just generally, now with becoming a EU compliant company, there's a lot of, data privacy stuff we have to do in the background. So holding on to the data ourselves. If we use a third party, for example, like the authentication stuff, like the selfie checks, the address checks, we also have to use trusted parties. So we go to rigorous due diligence processes there as well. So we're really trying to make sure to do everything as much as possible where there is no leakage. As soon as you have a third party involved, there is a certain risk, but we're really sticking to having companies that have a long lasting history. And if we can do it in-house, we do all of that stuff in-house so that there's no additional danger for any of customer information.
That's beautiful. And you already answered the next question that I wanted to ask, as in, for Bitcoiners getting new into the game, the importance of self custody. And I
Mhm.
remember, when I gave a couple of Bitcoins to my niece, I explained to her, what the 12 words are. And she immediately said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take down these 12 words and I'm going to put it in my passport. And she's telling everyone that, there's 12 words and I'm going to put it in the password. I was like, no, you don't tell them where you go to put your password,
Mhm.
the 12-digit numbers. Now, something which you touched base earlier on is regarding the investment that you received of $12 million in Series A
Mhm.
funding round. A part of it you talked about will be used for MiCA license,
Mhm.
push self-custody adoption, and educate investment in Bitcoin. Are there any upcoming features or partnership that really will be focusing on in this particular month or this particular year?
In terms of partnerships, like business partnerships, not really. The main focus is just, as I mentioned previously, fixing the product bugs that are happening,
Mhm.
expanding the product as well. And then really for us in marketing, we kind of made the joke, we finally have money now, we can do something. We do a great job from an organic marketing standpoint, but obviously if you have money in the bank and you can actually, set up campaigns, you
Yeah.
can do country specific things once you get the license, that really helps. So there's a lot of that stuff that will be happening, and I will be sort of thrown in the deep end where I will also go to a lot of non-Bitcoin, non-crypto events. Think of like finance events. Think of
Yeah.
being invited to a bank and protecting the Bitcoin stand. So we want to do a lot of that front. And then obviously also with my main job in the media presence, trying to find a solution where Bitcoin gets mentioned to just much more than simply being a number go up technology.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that happening. In terms of product, there are some exciting announcements that makes the Relay service more accessible. And then, based on what the market wants, maybe also, other products, as I mentioned, inheritance, maybe multi-sig, maybe these kind of things, where if people really want to have this, they can ask us and we can provide.
Now, you talked about, meetup events not connected to Bitcoin. Lately, I'm seeing this a lot of hype regarding tokenization. And
Mhm.
well, it is only because of Larry Fink in one of the
Mhm.
CNBC he talked about, and this was immediately after the Bitcoin Spot ETF. He talked about, he's focusing on tokenization, and immediately I'm seeing why LinkedIn
Mhm.
has become experts in tokenization overnight.
Yep.
So I think some of these tokenization events in there, if you can talk about Bitcoin, I think that'll be absolutely great. Now, one trend,
I mean,
yeah,
it's already happening a little bit. You have the Liquid network on
yeah,
Bitcoin, which is a
yep,
side chain where you can actually already tokenize stocks. And I think they even mentioned they even got the stock split with MicroStrategy done on there as well.
mhm.
So the technology is already there. I think it's just up to debate now whether TradFi can move into this. But this is what I meant previously. Like it connects really both worlds with Bitcoin. If TradFi people get over to a much more transparent system, being on a blockchain, being accessible, having these tokenizations that also move faster. They don't get approved by this or this department internally to complete your purchase. It just gets done immediately. I think this will be a net benefit, and it will be interesting to see how they're going to implement it.
And regarding Liquid Network, I think you can get a lot of information via Blockstream's website, isn't it?
Yes,
So
yes.
the information like the white paper and everything is available over there. Now, since the last few months, Joel, one trend which I'm observing, particularly in Dubai, I'm not sure if it is going on in Switzerland, would love to know your take on it. A lot of the banks, they are offering
Mm.
people to go and buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So what happens to, cryptocurrency exchanges or apps like yourself? Is there a trend that you see in Switzerland as well, or is it just only specific to Dubai at the moment?
No, I mean we definitely see this. So a lot of like the cantonal banks, so like cantons are sort of like their own provinces in Switzerland, and everyone has their own bank. And think of it, it's really your checkings and savings account where a lot of regular people, they get their salary deposited in there, they save, they spend, they invest a little bit. A lot of them actually already offer crypto custody products, where obviously they're the custodians of the product. I did speak to a few of these banks last year, and they really have a keen interest also in showing, hey, we're the first start in that process. Maybe you've heard about Bitcoin. Maybe you want to buy some. You can literally just do a one-click thing in your bank account and we'll deposit that into your account. But if you want to really hold on to Bitcoin, here are the alternatives. So we really did see a lot of that happening. I don't see it as an issue. I think it will also be inevitable that at one point we will have Bitcoin banks where the only thing you can do is having a Bitcoin account. Think of something like the Xapo Bank, for example, or any of these banks, Signum Bank, whatever. So I do think that will happen. It's happening at a quite rapid pace. The third largest bank in Switzerland is also offering this now. So slowly but surely we're moving into it. And we even heard UBS CEO Sergio Armotti now in Davos saying, like, to him it's speculation, but we have to acknowledge that Bitcoin is more than speculation and crypto as well. So I think we're just going on to that path where institutional adoption in banks is also happening. How people then will decide, that's up to debate. There's a big possibilities that banks go, like, instead of building this infrastructure, we just buy a company that's already doing this. So this could be a future. We know internally we're not going to sell to a bank. We want to be the people's bank. So, if people want to hold their money, they should do it their own way. But yeah, I think the next 2-3 years will be quite interesting in that matter as well. I'm just interested if that hype also continues with the next bear market, because these are usually like bull market signals, right?
Yeah,
but who knows? Maybe they got it and they go like, we need to offer it now, and people have the choice.
Definitely interesting times ahead. Now, while your LinkedIn post, you talked about, you want to orange pill the world, and you'll be doing that via the blue pill. But it also talks about hyperbitcoinization. Now, do you envision a world where hyperbitcoinization could exist, keeping in mind, there are right now over 220,000, I think more than 20,000 shitcoins, so to speak, isn't it? And we talked about the hypes regarding tokenization. Thankfully, now President Donald Trump has put a ban on central bank digital currencies, but other countries are still working on CBDCs and even artificial intelligence. Do you envision a world, let's say in a decade or more than a decade from now, where we will be in hyperbitcoinization?
Yeah, I mean, the EU's response to the non-CBDC stuff by Trump was, let's do even more CBDCs.
Even more CBDCs,
EU in a nutshell. I think hyperbitcoinization, to me, that can have many different routes. I mean, is there a possibility that Bitcoin could become the world currency and everyone just lives on Bitcoin? Sure. I have a little bit more of a realistic viewpoint. You mentioned the 20,000 so shitcoins. The ordinal stuff, for example, and the BRC20 token stuff showed you can also build stuff on Bitcoin that is not Bitcoin native. It is reserved in Bitcoin, but it builds its own currency, its own models. I think, to me, hyperbitcoinization will look more like we will have countries having Bitcoin as a reserve currency, and potentially with that technological development I mentioned, maybe have their own currency on top of Bitcoin. So you're kind of using Bitcoin without knowing it. Or maybe another way will be, there will be a soft fork, and it's like, okay, this is the soft fork for the Swiss franc, for the US dollar, for the euro, whatever. So I think a lot of that will look like this. I'm convinced that we will have this kind of future just based on what's happening now. We went from being magic internet dudes to, the biggest nation state in the world in terms of economic output, potentially setting up a reserve. So there will be a future where that will happen. Maybe that also goes into my vision of like Bitcoin banks. We will have a lot of that access. So if that works, I think that's a big success. And for Bitcoin, based on its premise, being proof of work, having the 10-minute block time and these kind of things, it doesn't really make it suitable natively to be a payment solution. So there has to be solutions. And I think it's just now up to the builders whether it's going to be native on-chain spending sats, maybe something like stable sats where you have a fiat-denominated price, or maybe even Bitcoin banks and Bitcoin currencies where anything is attached to it somehow. And yeah, who knows? Maybe there will be shitcoins on Bitcoin. That's sort of the thing. Again, like gambling will always be there. And we will see whether that will have an impact or not.
Simon Dixon, one of the OGs of Bitcoin, I think he's been talking about Bitcoin even before Bitcoin was created. He was one of the guys who used to talk about Bitcoin reserves since a very long time. And I often, every Thursdays, I go live on LinkedIn and we discuss which is the first country which will make a bold announcement of buying Bitcoin and putting it as a strategic reserve and officially doing it. Am I right in saying that Switzerland might just be one of the first countries to do that? What is your thoughts on that?
Technically speaking, yes. We based on a legislation standpoint, we would have that. Realistically speaking, if this initiative I mentioned previously goes through, So Switzerland is quite unique. We can get 100,000 valid signatures. We can
Yeah.
propose a law change. It could be then put up to a popular vote. And if that one is accepted, it becomes reality. However, the timeline on that would be 2030 by latest. So by
Okay.
then you would have the law in place for the national bank to buy Bitcoin. But technically speaking, yes, if the small and the big chambers in parliament, as well as the federal council, decide we want to use this, they can propose a mandate to the national bank, which is independent of these bodies, to actually do this, or the other way around. They indirectly hold around 1,000 Bitcoin now through
Yeah.
MicroStrategy and these kind of things. Maybe they go like, hey, these guys who keep yelling at us on X with like, you would have this performance, the franc would be more stable, you would be less dependent on stuff like American markets. That could be an alternative. And they could implement it right away as well. Knowing who works at the national banks, there's a lot of hidden Bitcoiners. I know this because I know them personally. I think we could be on the brink of this happening. It just remains to be seen if the US does it now, if then the National Bank of Switzerland is fast enough to react. But let's say the signs are all there. And it would be a cool story, like the small country in the middle of Europe, again, proving everyone wrong and doing the right thing by using Bitcoin as a reserve currency.
Definitely interesting times ahead. Now, regarding hyper-Bitcoinization, Joel, I do have a very tricky question because when you talk about Bitcoin, it is definitely rooted in Austrian economics, which warns us about the dangers of monopolies. But if you look at it today, and if you're realistic, a lot of the Bitcoins are held by multi-billionaires, trillion-dollar companies like BlackRock, MicroStrategy. So when you talk about hyper-Bitcoinization, I do think about countries, let's say like Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, or even India for that matter. How realistically would they benefit with hyper-Bitcoinization? What is your thoughts, opinion regarding that?
Sure. So with the regards as to the holders, every billionaire has a selling price. That's not only my opinion, but my conviction, because you see it with everything happening. BlackRock holding the Bitcoin, I mean, they hold it on the behalf of their clients. If they decide to sell, they're being sold. And I think especially let's say the poorer countries in the world, they would profit from a financial system that's much more stable and sound. We would not have the infinite money printing into oblivion.
Yeah.
And that goes a little bit into what I was saying previously. I'm not a big fan of hegemony and like having a monopoly. Potentially, we could then see, having Bitcoin as a reserve currency, being with these local currencies that then being deployed on it. We would also potentially see, loans being deployed on Bitcoin. Think of the IMF loans. I know the IMF gets hated on a lot of in the Bitcoin world, but generally speaking, that's how a lot of that first, second, third world country aspect has been formed. And having a loan on Bitcoin to fall back on something that is sound, that cannot be reproduced, that cannot be inflated away, I think in the long run, this would also boost these economies. And just generally speaking, what they're lacking is the opportunity to be part of the financial world. And I think through Bitcoin, they have that opportunity. Obviously, it would be even greater if they realize this now already and sort of do what Bhutan is doing, El Salvador is doing. Whether that's too late, I don't know. Whether they maybe have the resources, I also don't know. But I think definitely on that standpoint, we would have or see a benefit. And again, I'm leaning more towards the hyper-Bitcoinized world where you have still local currencies backed by Bitcoin, and you can have a fiat currency-ish that is not being printed and inflated away. And yeah, if that happens, look at what happened in Argentina, where the government sort of just did it 180 and said like, F all of that we're going to make it better. It works. And I think if it works in that sense, on a Bitcoin standard, the same strategy would work even better. And yeah, it's really up to whether such vast currencies would have the opportunities to arise. But I think based on what we've seen over like 15 years, 16 years now in Bitcoin, not only is it possible, but it's happening on a daily basis. And you can clearly see interest rising by these kind of regions and countries.
Definitely liking this answer, one of the best. Now, one of the visions of Satoshi Nakamoto and the premise of creation of Bitcoin is separation of money and the state. Do you expect a full separation of money and the state, let's say in a couple of decades, or will there be a lot of government intervention?
I mean,
It's a tricky question.
did it mention the separation of money and state in the white paper? That's always my question. I think this is again one of the narratives that's being pushed.
No, it did not mention about. Definitely
Yeah,
did not. Yeah.
I think it's just separation of like trusting third parties in the sense of like the
Yeah.
financial aspects of things. But obviously, if you go down the rabbit hole, you realize like, hey, money should be a private entity and not being controlled by literally the people that are running the money and ruining the money. Would it have a separation? I think it would be a middle ground. Sort of look at what's happening with Doge now in America with the Department of Government Efficiency. You could have these unofficial government bodies that are really trying to find the most private sector efficient way of getting the job done. I could see a lot of that happening. I recently read, I can't remember by whom, there has been this interesting thought experiment that a Bitcoin central bank could also be formed, not in a way that you actually, print money and like control the currencies, but just having an entity like the Bank of International Settlement, but for Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin International Settlement as a name to speak, that then also enables the inclusion of maybe countries like Bangladesh, to use our example, or just third world countries that get back into that system. So I see a lot of that happening, but I think for it to succeed, it has to be driven by the private sector and not by the public sector. So there will be a separation. Whether the state will give up that separation, that's a different topic. But I think we will move more into this like privately controlled entities that are there for the better good and not for, shareholder value or whatever.
Yeah, I'm really curious to check, what the development of Doge is. Unfortunately, it looks like Vivek Ramaswamy might be stepping down and he's focusing on for the governor of Ohio. But definitely things are looking interesting. I just have a few more questions. And one of the questions regarding, what is the political stance regarding Bitcoin in Switzerland or in other places where you're at from the European region? Are they pro-Bitcoin or are they detractors of Bitcoin? You touch base on some of them who, are pro-Bitcoin, but generally, overall speaking, what is their stance regarding Bitcoin?
I think Bitcoin has really the unique problem voters had to not voice their opinion. So it's a silent majority, I would say, that support it. They see the need for it. Europe is just so left-leaning at this point. I mean, there's clearly a shift happening. Right-wing parties and conservatives are stepping more into, and sort of the middle is finally being strengthened again. Where they go like, neither end is good, but like we need to have a core in the middle. The general look and scope of things from the left is Bitcoin is evil because it's environmentally unfriendly. And they spend no time investing any resources into if it actually is. They all focus on a very poorly researched paper by The Economist in 2018, which has been disproven numbers of times, but sort of patient zero, and everyone spreads the same FUD. However, there's really, you did see it like the last 2 weeks, representatives of the Conservative Party in Austria, in Germany, in Switzerland, in France, in England, in, I think, Italy as well. They're coming out and saying, I hold Bitcoin, I see the use case, and we should be first to move. So not that the US wins again, quote unquote, and sets up that reserve. We could do the same thing in our own countries, and we could really profit from the federalistic systems we have in place in Europe. So I think, generally speaking, people are more friendly towards it. It's just that they're not courageous enough yet to voice their opinions because a lot of the left-leaning voices are very loud and very powerful in Europe. But, that's subject to change. And there's the saying in Bitcoin, come for the gain, stay for the revolution. And I think a lot of people in Europe are moving into that revolutionary standpoint that really go like, no, whatever the ECB is doing currently, it's not working. Unfortunately, we would love to see if it works, but it's not working. And we have to find another outlet. And that's where Bitcoin comes in massively. I think the biggest Bitcoin obsessionists are with the ECB. They regularly release research papers and just
one-sided research
report BS. So the more that happens, I think the more it strengthens the silent majority. And who knows, at one point, they may be a loud majority.
And you talked about left-leaning politician. I do remember, I think it was in 2019, a Labour Party from UK.
Hmm.
She actually said that, she would physically hit someone who uses Bitcoin. They
Hmm.
were so apprehensive and negative sentiments toward Bitcoin. And Nigel Farage, who I think might could be the next prime minister, who is a conservative. I think he might be the next prime minister. And he's a massive fan of Bitcoin. Is a massive fan of Bitcoin, and he's definitely against central bank digital currencies as well. So what I wanted to find out is, what role can Relay play to better educate politicians in getting a better understanding of what Bitcoin is? Because according to me, I think a lot of politicians, they don't understand what Bitcoin is, but once
Hmm.
they understand
Hmm.
what Bitcoin is, it's a light bulb moment for them. Unless you're really corrupt politicians, you don't want them to
Hmm.
your country to adopt Bitcoin. So what is it that really can do to go ahead and make sure the politicians are better understanding and get a better understanding of what Bitcoin is?
So what we do is being part of like Bitcoin Association Switzerland and these kind of things that help out. We don't want to actively, go towards politics. We let them come to us, but we're very open. It doesn't matter if it's a left-leaning party, a right-leaning party, somewhere in the
Yeah,
middle, the Green Party, for example. If they're interested in finding out more about Bitcoin, we're there to help. We have a lot of the reference materials, we have a lot of the stuffs, and just generally speaking, I'm trying for as much as I can with the videos and the content I put out to also give all viewpoints. There is a very progressive viewpoint of Bitcoin, strengthening humanitarian rights, banking the unbanked. There's a very conservative viewpoint, like less government, more control
yeah,
in the individual, and everything falls under that umbrella. So I'm trying to put out as much content to satisfy all ends. I do have my political preferences, they're a little bit more conservative leaning based on being a libertarian. You kind of move into
yeah,
that niche. But also there, I'm well aware if someone from the other spectrum is interested, I could provide that information.
yeah.
And yeah, if any of the politicians are watching this for somewhat odd reason, if you have questions, reach out and don't hesitate to ask these questions, because you will never learn unless you invest the time and actually ask the questions. And they're no silly questions. Like, everyone has at one point had doubts about something.
Yeah.
And if we can lift that doubt, even better.
There's always the saying, the only silly question is the question that is not asked. So,
Yep,
I kind
exactly.
of agree to what you're saying. Thanks so much, you all, for doing this. One final question, not connected to Bitcoin, not connected to politics. Your favorite genre of music and why?
I cannot show it now because I would need to. Well, you can kind of
Tattoos?
see it a little bit. I got a Blink-182 tattoo, a Paramore tattoo.
Oh,
I'm
excellent.
really into punk rock. I've
Paramore.
always have
Oh,
been.
yeah.
They've all gone a bit soft now for my taste.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, where are the good old days? I like punk rock, but I grew up in a household where we listened to every kind of music. We also have musicians in the family. So I'm open to hearing everything. But, if I have a work session, I need to crank out some good content. It's always going to be punk rock. It's just my thing.
The drummer is absolutely wicked, particularly in punk rock, isn't it?
Yeah, and I used to play electric guitar and, learning the riffs and kind of
Oh,
stuff. So it's cool to see. But yeah, I think what I would not voluntarily listen to is like classical music. I would fall
oh
asleep actually.
yeah.
But yeah, there has to be a little bit of something going on. And then
Yep,
again,
yep,
being libertarian, the punk rock
yep.
idea kind of stuff fits. So
It fits
that was always
perfectly
fun.
well, yeah. Even Rage Against the Machine, they were kind of iconic, isn't
Yeah,
it? I think they are split right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so very much, you all, for doing this. Any final message that you have for our audience, and what's the best way people can get in contact with you or the team from Relay?
Sure. So if you want to get in contact with me, I'm underscore JKLNZ. I will send you the links on
Yeah,
Twitter
yeah. Oh,
and just my name on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect, happy to chat. And if you follow Relay, it's mostly either relay.app or relay_app on X, LinkedIn, on YouTube, obviously. Yeah, and if you have questions, just get in touch. Don't hesitate to reach out. My DMs are always open, and would love to chat Bitcoin.
perfect. Thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.